are again. John Hall, Blues Creek Guitars, as you know by now, my friend Glenn behind the camera. We were asked a number of times about filling and finish. I will admit that I do anymore send most of my guitars out for finish because of a time constraint. It's just a lot easier for me. But let me show you how I used to do this. And I'm going to tell you right now, when it comes down to it, if you don't take the time to do a good prep, you may as well accept the fact you'll never get a good finish. Now, we're talking about a spray finish, nitro lacquer, and I'm going to show you a number of techniques to do. Now, number one, the first thing you got to do, stain it, or if you choose not to stain it, you need to get a seal coat on. So, I have the seal coat on. The next thing I have to do is I have to mask off anything that I don't want to color. Now you can see I have this nice purfling strip here. So I have to mask that off. Now, I like to mask it off. I'm going to use a fresh razor blade. You can also use an X-Acto blade. And masking tape. So what I will do is I'm going to lay this out right on the edge. Okay? And this is 3M tape. I use this a lot also for my binding. And the reason why I like to use this, it actually stretches a little bit. So, as you can see, I now have my centerpiece partially masked off. Now what I want to do next, because I'm right-handed, alright, I'm going to take a ruler. I'm going to take my new fresh razor blade, right here. And obviously, if you don't have a back strip, you don't need to do this step. And please keep your fingers out of the sharp stuff. We don't want you bleeding. Okay, so there's my razor blade. I can now cheat a little bit. And I'm going to actually tape this down . Alright, now the reason why I put the ruler down, that definitely helps me control my razor blade. I'm not going to be putting a lot of pressure because I don't want to fill a scratch mark, but now I can just set the corner, and you can actually hear it cutting. And I'm going to run one more time down. And I just want to cut through the tape. I don't really want to cut into the wood. So, another thing that you could do if you don't feel comfortable cutting this, you can mask it off on the wood side and shoot a couple coats of finish and build that up, and that you can scrape off. But you'd have to do that and let it sit for a day to cure. Okay, so this has now been scored. I'm going to cut this off right there. I'm going to cut that off right here. Now we're only going to be working on the back. We aren't going to do the entire process per se. But the process would be we'd stain it, seal it, fill it. Then after we're done filling it, and it would probably fill twice, we'll seal it again. There we go. And you can see I've left that line. And you see that I'm peeling it back like this rather than up and out, because I want to make sure I score that line. By doing it that way, it will follow that score line. So now I can rub this in with my finger, and while we get to the next step, he's going to take a photo of that.
Rolling.
Okay, I laid paper down, and this can be a messy job. There are a couple of techniques of filling. A friend of mine, Sylvan Wells, he actually uses super glue, and I have used super glue in the past. You know, you can try it. I think we had a little bit of trouble with the first time we did it with it adhering, and I think basically I probably sanded too fine. What we did do when we did use super glue is we hit it almost with pure acetone out of we had 2 sprayers, mixed it, hit it with acetone, and then shot lacquer right on top of that, and that seemed to work fairly well. But super glue off gases, and it's kind of a foul odor, something that you probably really don't want to breathe a lot of. But let's just do it outside in the middle of a hurricane or a tornado, you'll probably be fine. Now I will mix up enough filler just to do one part and then the other. So I'm going to show you how I prepare my filler. Now when you buy this, I use Pore. Martin uses a very similar product, and they get it pre-colored. After all, they know what color they're using. As a builder, I never know what my customer wants, so I like to use natural. I can always change it. I'm going to take a stick. Okay, when this stuff sits for a long length of time, it will separate. That's normal. So we have to stir this up a little bit. And think of filler. It has a mineral spirit based solvent. And I think they use silica. You can see there's looks like putty almost. And what we're going to do is just keep stirring this up a little bit. And I can feel I'm working my way down to the bottom of the can. Now, I'll explain to you what I'm doing here. We're trying to get this somewhat homogeneous. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to color the filler. So, we've prepped our guitar body, or whatever it is you want to fill. I don't sand much beyond 180 grit. 150 grit actually is sometimes pretty good. We want to allow a certain amount of, I'm going to call it tooth. If you try to get too fine in the sanding process, the wood becomes burnished, and lacquer will probably have an adhesion problem at that point. So it needs to have a little bit of tooth to hang on to. So this is starting to get a nice slurry. You can see the colors becoming more homogeneous. And I'm only going to mix as much as I need. I'm not going to mix a lot. And you can see why I put paper down. So I'm going to take about, that's probably about enough. Okay. I'm going to grab a little bit of the liquid. And now, as I'm squishing this in, I'm looking at it. Okay, you can look at here, and you can see how it looks wet, but when I cut into it, it you can see the, almost like joint compound. So, I'm going to stir this around a little bit. And I'm going to add a little bit more of the liquid. And you can see I just like dip in there and drip some on. And I'm actually kind of happy now. I think with what I have there, I'm pretty close. So, if you take something across the top, that way as you tap it on, you're not splashing all over the shop. And I'm going to move this out of my way, because for now we're done with it. Now, the next thing I got to do is I got to mix the color. Now, what I like to do here, you can see I'm getting this starting to stir up nice. Alright? And kind of like molten ice cream. Remember when you were a kid you'd stir it up? Well, that's kind of what we're doing. And what I want to get, you can see how it's looking like ice cream or icing. Now I want to get color in here. So to get the color, mineral spirit based stain, mineral spirit based filler, they're compatible. And it doesn't take a lot. You can see I'm just adding drops. Alright? Okay, get a little bit more color.
What color stain is it?
Okay, the color stain that I happen to be using right now, this is Minwax Special Walnut. I like the Special Walnut because it has a red, a little bit of a red to it. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to go get ebony. Okay? Now here's the ebony. My three stains of choice, I usually use Minwax, but I will use other brands if it's not available, as long as it's mineral spirit based. So I have the Special Walnut. Now I can drop in some black, the ebony. Okay, now you can see it starting to darken up. Okay, and right now it's starting to look more like a charcoal gray, and that's fine. We want it dark. Okay, now I'm done with the stick. Now the next tool is a fork, and why I want the fork is I kind of want to whip this up pretty nice. I'm going to put a little bit more brown in it. What I'm looking for is a nice dark color, and I'll accept that color. You want anything that is going to have a color match that'll match what we're doing. So let me show you. You can see it's kind of, see that? I don't have globs. It's actually running nice. Okay? Now I have about 3 tablespoons of material in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply this material, and then we're going to wait for it to flash over. Now flashing over is when it's starting to dry. We aren't going to let this dry. We want this to, you'll see the color glaze from wet to almost like a chocolate bar. So for every tablespoon I want to put a drop or 2 of naphthalene. So right here, the more naphtha you put in, the faster it's gonna flash. I'm gonna put about 6 drops in. Alright, I'm going to keep that handy in case I need it. Okay, I'll stir this in. A little more brown. Okay, now how do I apply it? You can use a paintbrush. I'll probably just use a paper towel. You can put it on any number of ways. Martin they'll put it in and then they actually will buff this off with a lamb's wool bonnet. I found that when you're doing it by hand, the material that you want to use, you don't want to use something that's real absorbent. You want to use something that will create a little ball. So, what I'm going to use here will just be a cheap little paint. I'm just going to use a cheap little bristle, nothing real high-end. And you can see that's kind of wet. And I'm just going to kind of rub it in. Now you can see I'm kind of doing little circles, and I'm trying to get it so that I can actually rub this into the pores of the wood. And if you watch, okay, now I'm getting it covered up nice. We have a nice coating. See that? Now, you see I'm going across the grain this time? Okay? Okay, now watch this, and in a few minutes you're going to see it go from this wet glossy look, you'll actually start seeing it go sheeny. Okay, it's going to go from a gloss to a satin. Okay, one way that you can tell it's starting to flash, okay, I'm doing this, and I see it's here, it's kind of puddling up yet, but it's going to start balling. Okay, now what I can do now is I'm going to take a scraper. You can use a credit card, almost anything, and I'm kind of rubbing with the grain, then I'm going against the grain. And what you have to think about what we're doing is we're trying to push this material into the pores of the wood. All right? Now, you can see that it's starting to get a lot more sheeny. Martin uses a lamb's wool bonnet. In fact, they're old buffer bonnets. They'll use them to buff in this material. Now you can see on my end, I don't know if we can get a picture of that or not, but you can actually see where the pores actually picked up some of the material. Alright? And I don't want to rub it in or rub it off too quick. So I'm just going to kind of rub this in a little bit more, or push it in with my scraper here. A rubber squeegee works. But now you can see that there is definitely a sheen here. You can see this material. You can see how it's making little balls. Alright? Now that's what we want. Now generally I'll use a material like burlap or denim, a coarser material, and I wear these because I can't see very well real close, but now I can look at my pores. Now as I'm rubbing, you can see that's starting to look like a mess. Okay? But if you look close, you can see it starting to roll up into little balls. Okay. Now you can see this on the video here. You can see these little, you see them? You see the balls? That's what you want. Now as I'm rubbing this, and I'm getting a hand and an arm cramp, alright, that's fine. I'll suffer. But what I'm doing now, this is turning kind of like mud, and as I'm rubbing it, it's actually getting into the pore of the wood. All right. Now I'll probably do 2 coats. For the sake of the demonstration here, we're going to just basically do 1 so that you can see what this process is like. Now, we started with it wet. We let it go till it flashed. You saw me rubbing it in, and you saw how those balls worked up. Now if you touch this, while it feels dry, there's still a tackiness to it. So I did one side one way. I'm going to show you a different technique on another. Now I will say this in the meantime though, can you see the surface sheen? Alright? Sealed film. Okay, you see that? Now, if you look real close here, while you can see the pores, you can see that there is that they are filled. Let me see if this will help. Can you see how you see that little discoloration in the pores? Alright? And that's fine when that gets sprayed, but you can see how the pores actually took a fill. We'll let that dry for a little bit before we do anything else, because if I get on there too quick and do a second coat, the solvents, because this hasn't cured yet, will actually take the new stuff out. So, or I should say the old stuff. So you want to allow this to dry. A few hours between coats is fine. Now what I want to do, I'm going to clean up the mess on the sides here. And we'll have to score, or we'll have to scrape the bindings later. But as you can see, you can actually see balls of the material that I rubbed up, and you can see how they aren't smearing. They've actually gotten kind of like, I don't know what we used to play with that I could, like rubber cement. When we were kids, we'd take rubber cement and smear it. Okay, so that side, as you can see, has a sheen to it, and you'll know it'll be dry when you can rub on it with your hand and not see it do anything. When you're all done, it will have a nice sheen to it. Now, the other way of doing this, I'm going to call this the cheater's way, but it does work. Okay. I'm trying to rub off the material the best I can, and I'm going to mask off this side. So we had one side with Pore Pack. This side I'm going to do another way, and I'll admit it's not my favorite way, but I just want to give you the information so that you can see how this is done. Now the super glue that I'm using is a thin CA. It does have as it cures, it will have an odor. Now, what you'll do is you lay this on and you'll have to sand it back later. But watch what we do. I'm going to pour some on here. Then get away from it. And it will stink. And watch that. Watch the paper towel. That's an ectothermic reaction. Yeah, it's curing up. And that is one of the ways of doing the super glue method. And I'll actually put another coat of super glue on there dried. All right. Coat number 2. And you're going to say, why don't you finish a guitar with super glue? Well, I guess you probably can. You can do anything if you want to. Okay. Now, once you have a coat on there, the second coat cures pretty quickly. And I do suggest that you do this in a well-ventilated area, because the fumes are less than pleasant. Okay. That's actually not bad. So, one off. I'm going to take this off. So you can see how by putting the masking on the back purfling strip, that saved that pretty nicely. Now, as the super glue cures off, just about done. Then we're going to kind of hit this with a little scuff, and I'll actually be able to hit it with a sprayer. Okay. You can see a definite appearance between super glue and the filler, and that is pretty simple just in its chemistry. Super glue, you know, it's got that big long word. It's basically an acrylic. This is not. This is the cellulose in a mineral base, mineral spirit base. So, with that covered, we're going to let that go a little bit, and now I'm actually going to try to hit this with a coat of sealer on top of that, and you'll be able to get to see what it will look like, and you can compare one to the other. Now, like I'm going to tell you, super glue, there's some people who are very sensitive to it. Please use common sense. I don't have a mask on because I need to speak, but I also have decent ventilation in my shop. Good. Now watch. I'm going to take a fine sandpaper, 800, 600 is nice. Okay. .600 grit sandpaper on this side. Actually, that's not done gassing. Okay, I'm just going to hit this a little bit with the steel wool on, this is the filled side. So when you're looking at the guitar, bass side will be the Pore pack. The treble side will be super glue. So, too bad. 180. Okay, now I have 180 grit on here, and I'm going to try to be, remember this is a demo, so I'm trying, I don't want to go across my line. 180 grit. Okay. And look at your sandpaper often when you see that glazing over. Okay, get a new piece of sandpaper. Okay, I fold it in thirds. Now just for the sake of the demonstration here, the super glue, being very porous and viscous, will flow into the pores rather readily, and it will take about 3 coats of finish till you actually see how good it gets. So during the course of the day, we will come back to this so that at the end of the video you'll get to see the before and after. All right. Actually doesn't look too bad. So I'm going to take I'm just going to rub this off a little bit and get the dust off, and you won't actually see me spraying this because I'm going to go outside, but you can see between the two sides the appearance is very similar. Okay? Now this is 1 coat of Pore Pack on one side, 2 coats of super glue on the other. I would have liked to have done 2 or 3 coats of Pore Pack, but hopefully this will give you an insight on the process. Okay. 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 This is after 1 coat of finish. We'll actually put a coat of sealer over the can you see the, alright, and we'll get it a little bit closer. Can you, picking up the light?
Yep.
And you can see super glue, Pore Pack. I can always change it. I'm going to take a stick. Yeah, to the guy that said have all of your stuff ready, I almost did. Here we go. I want a thin little stick. Well, oh, my air compressor.
What's wrong with that?
We're rolling.
Okay.